Skulking? Is we going to add something to the end?
They surprise us and come in mass.
All right. Morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to the December 10th, 2015 regularly scheduled Planning Commission. I'm calling it to order. If you would, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have a item this morning, time certain, at 9 o'clock, the educational facilities impact fees. So we're going to defer the regular business until after hearing this item. So, Mr. Osborne, if you would, actually, Ms. Knapp.
Would you like me to read the changes into the record?
Is it relative to item number 6?
Yes,
Okay, yes, please, if you would. Ms. Knapp, are there any changes to the agenda?
there are. There's two. Item number 5, which is PDR 1513 ZP, Panasora Corp., Tennessee Street Property LLC, the Oasis at University. This item is to be continued to April 14th, 2016 Plan Commission meeting. And the second item that's changed is item 6, Ordinance 16-03, Educational Facility Impact Fees. Additional documents added, public comment letter and slideshow presentation. And that summarizes the changes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Osborne, I would like to ask Mr. Clegg, the County Attorney's Office, to please clarify what the intent of the process today relative to the impact fees for educational facilities is.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. This is going to be very similar to the discussion we had at the last Planning Commission regarding the county's impact fees. The only difference is that the school impact fee is not included in the county's land development code. It's in our code of ordinances. For that reason, historically, it did not come to the Planning Commission in the early 2000s, but because so much of school concurrency has been incorporated into the Community Planning Act and our comprehensive plan, we do feel that in order to move forward with this ordinance, it is necessary to put it before the Planning Commission simply for the purpose of getting your decision on its consistency with the comprehensive plan. It is not to get into the dollars and cents of financing. There are some components of an impact fee study that have to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and are driven by the comprehensive plan, and you'll hear from staff and our consultant as to those issues. But that's all we're asking for today.
Thank you, Mr. Clegg. And if
Legislative. It is a legislative matter. People do not need to be sworn.
Thank you very much. If members of the audience or public at large, if they have a question regarding the financial element, where should they voice these concerns?
John, can you answer that?
Yeah, John Osborne, planning official. They could contact myself, and we will handle any questions regarding the fee study. And also, if it's something we cannot answer specifically as Manatee County government staff, we have school board staff here as well that can also assist.
Thank you very much, Mr. Osborne. Okay, if we could, let's proceed with item number 6.
Thank you, sir. I'm John Osborne, the planning official for Manatee County. And before you today is consideration of an educational facility impact fee. And as y'all have been informed before, impact fees are one-time fees assessed on new development. In the case of an educational facility impact fee, it's a one-time fee assessed on residential development. This fee would address a new development's impact on educational facilities, its infrastructure, services associated, especially with the school board's public school system. The impact fee update has to be consistent with our comprehensive plan, as Mr. Clegg described. And in the comprehensive plan, as you all are well aware, we have adopted level of service standards for infrastructure and services in the county. And the school board also has infrastructure service standards that are reflected in our annual capital improvements element update. And impact fees are used to improve infrastructure and services, but not necessarily maintain existing infrastructure and services. They're used to basically add capacity to the school system and for additional students that are generated by new growth. And they cannot be used to replace, maintain, or rehabilitate, again, things or infrastructure and services for existing students or existing infrastructure. The impact fee update is also reflected, the impact fees are reflected in the school board's previous capital improvements plan prior to 2009, when they had an impact fee actually implemented prior to that date. And impact fees are required to be consistent with the Florida Impact Fee Act. And impact fees are required to be updated on a regular basis. We like to have ours updated at least once every 5 years. And for an efficiency perspective, we actually work jointly with the school board in this endeavor. We hired Tischler Bice, which you'll hear from in a few minutes, on updating not only Manatee County government's impact fees, but also the school board impact fees. We utilize some shared data and resources that are made available every 5 years, actually, by the Metropolitan Planning Organization. When they update their long-range transportation plan, they do a really detailed population projection and jobs and employment analysis. So we utilize that data for this and actually other infrastructure planning that we do in the county. And the Manatee County government's impact fee has been approved by Board of County Commissioners. But also before you today is, in your packet, is the Manatee County School Impact Fee Study dated November 3rd, 2015. As we've talked about before, new development requires the school board to continue to meet its level of service standards for educational facilities. And impact fees are a major funding source to keep public educational facilities consistent with their adopted standards. Adoption of these educational impact fees will ensure that new development pays a fair share of the costs that the school board will incur in accommodating residential growth and new students that will come from that growth. And on November 10th, 2015, the school board adopted Resolution 1508, which accepted the Tischler Bice study and transmitted this resolution to the Board of County Commissioners with a request to implement the impact fee as provided in the ordinance that's in your packet. And we're asking today that Planning Commission review this study and fee schedule today for consistency with the comprehensive plan and the policies therein. And this will go on to the Board of County Commissioners on January 7th, 2016. So the staff recommendation is this, and I apologize, I'm reading quite a bit here. I want to get into the record. But based on the study, the educational facility impact fees recommended are fair, reasonable, and roughly proportionate to the capital needs generated by new development, for which such fees shall be levied and do not exceed the costs incurred by the Manatee County School Board to accommodate the new development that will pay the impact fees, and that the standards, assumptions, and capital facility standards in the impact fee study and the terms and provisions of this ordinance are consistent with the Manatee County Comprehensive Plan. And staff recommends that the new educational facility impact fees be adopted. And there's also an amendment to our county code of ordinances. Usually the Planning Commission gets involved in our land development code amendments to that, but this actually goes into our code of ordinances, which is a different document. And the effective date of these new fees would be April 18th, 2016. And actually, I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. Dwayne Guthrie of Tischler Bice, and he has a very short presentation on this study.
Thank you, Mr. Osborne.
Good morning, Planning Commission. Dwayne Guthrie with Tischler Bice. I'm a principal with the firm. Just kind of full disclosure, I want to let you know that Carson Bice, the president of our firm, took the lead in this study, but he had a prior conflict out in Las Vegas today, so I'm here making the presentation, although I'm very familiar with Manatee County and actually did the school impact fees probably back in the early 2000s. So yeah, if you could switch over to the slideshow. We have about 10 slides we want to go through. We have some maps because as the Planning Commission, you're charged with thinking spatially and being concerned about some issues with as far as the growth patterns in the county. So we want to kind of look at the, doesn't seem to be advancing. Can you help me out? There we go, thank you. So we have three maps. We're going to look at the pattern of school utilization for the three different school levels. This is elementary school. The darker colors indicate higher utilization, or basically, you know, at capacity, kind of where we have capacity issues. The lighter colors then would be less utilization, where we have some capacity. And one of the reasons we kind of wanted to look at these maps, which are done by the geographic areas of each school, so they're going to be different for elementary, middle, and high school because you have a lot more elementary schools. They have smaller enrollments and smaller geographic service areas for each school. So you kind of see the pattern. We wanted to kind of analyze the capacity situation today that mainly address some of the things that we were recommending that these fees be done countywide. And we wanted to talk about that because, at least on the transportation impact fees, they were done by 4 geographic areas. And also in Manatee County, we have the How Will We Grow effort, the visioning effort that you went through, the Planning Commission and the County Commission and the public. And you did make a point that there was a difference geographically between the more urban Southwest versus the more suburban areas. Unfortunately, our capacity patterns don't fall out that way, and you'll see they change very much. So even in this case, we have some higher schools that have more utilized in the southwest area of the county. So it's not just out in the more eastern part. Go to the next slide, please. Thanks. This is the pattern for the middle schools. And you can kind of see maybe even some surprising results here where we have in the western area of Bradenton, that one of the schools is very much utilized. But again, the general pattern is that the eastern portion of the county has higher utilization rates than the lighter colors there that are shown. Although there are even in the northwest some schools that still have capacity at the middle school level. And then the next slide would be the high school. And here you see the problem is getting more severe, where there really is only one school that has any significant amount of capacity. All the other schools are pretty much heavily utilized, indicated by the darker colors. So because you see the very different patterns geographically and that there's not a consistent fallout in one area across all 3 schools, the fees are being recommended to be imposed on a countywide basis. Next slide, please. So here are the projections of not only housing units, which John mentioned earlier was the same data that we're using for the other school impact fees. So that top row are the same housing unit data that you'll see in the impact fees for the county. The bottom portion of the table is the additional students, and whenever we're talking here, we're talking public schools only, so it's not homeschools or private schools, and we're also excluding the charter schools. So what you see there is a projected increase on that far right column of additional students that would go to public schools, non-charter schools in Manatee County. And given the size of each school and the planning kind of standards, that roughly translates into, over the next 10 years, a need for 4 elementary schools, an additional middle school, and an additional high school. Now, I think the intent is probably not to add 4 brand new elementary schools. There might be some additions to existing schools, but that's the equivalent need that's out there. Next slide. Hello. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to go over the what we did to update the study. Part of that is student generation rate, so we have to show how many public school students we expect from each additional housing unit, and that's the entire housing stock because every new unit will be paying an impact fee. So we calculated the new student generation rates using Manatee County data from the Census Bureau's 2013 American Community Survey public use microdata sample. So you actually get from the Census Bureau, similar to what we did for the other county fees, the survey results, and that indicates the number of schools, kids, or school-age children, and whether they're in public school or not. So we can crunch the numbers by school level and by type of housing unit. And the housing units that we're using for the school impact fee analysis are the same breakdown. They're 4 categories that have been used for quite some time now in Manatee County for the concurrency evaluation. So unlike the county impact fees that are done by dwelling size, the drill down or the specificity on the school impact fees are by type of housing unit. So it's a little different approach. The rates do not include charter school students, and this approach does satisfy the Impact Fee Act requirement of using the most recent and localized data. Next slide. Here's the numbers for the updated students by school level and house type. And you can kind of see the breakdown that they're broken out. Actually, you get a little higher enrollment for townhouses and duplexes. That's what the TH stands for there in the second column. The third column is manufactured homes. And in Manatee County, that tends to be Mostly mobile home parks are heavily used by retirees, and so that's why the student generation rates are so low. Not a lot of those being built today, but I guess we still would have that category just in case. And then the far right column is multifamily, which is basically apartment buildings. So you see the weighted average. We expect for each house 0.222 students, public school, non-charter school students. So a lot of people can understand that better if you think of for every 1,000 housing units that we add to Manatee County, we get 222 additional public school students. So that's probably an easier way to interpret that. Next slide. The school impact fees have these cost categories. We have cost components for school buildings, portables, land, buses, and administrative and support facilities. And for the level of service calculations, we use permanent capacity versus current enrollment, which is actually a conservative approach, and it ensures that new development is not paying for a higher level of service. So the fees are based on the actual current enrollment that we have today. The impact fees include two types of credits. There's a debt service credit because we're using an incremental expansion cost method. Basically, we're documenting our current levels of service, and then the fees are designed to maintain that level of service. So the concept is that each new the housing unit is paying for its share of additional capacity needed to accommodate the demand for school space. And because of that, the school has some debt obligations that were used to establish that current level of service. So to make sure there's no double payment, there is a revenue credit for the new development's share of the debt on those existing schools. We also went beyond that and added another level of credits based on other revenue sources that could be used for capacity expansion. And that's basically the three that you see that listed there. The district has a capital improvement tax, which is a property tax, and then there's a state capital outlay debt service that we have some money that comes back to the county from the state for capital expansion or for capital projects, and then there's also a portion of the sales tax that could be used for capital. That sales tax, of course, is scheduled to sunset in about 3 years, so we only have a credit for those remaining years left on that. So here's the dollar amounts on the school impact fees broken out by the different cost components. So you see at the top of the school buildings and then portables, land, the support facilities, and then buses at the bottom. And by far, if you just eyeball the magnitude of the dollar amounts shown the cost per student, clearly the biggest chunk of the money is for the additional school buildings. The other cost factors are relatively minor. And then at the bottom, you see the two credits that I mentioned. There are negative amounts, which gives you a net cost per capital cost per student. And then those numbers at the very bottom then are multiplied by the student generation rates that we already went over to come up with the proposed school impact fees. So the dollar amounts that you see there are I think the terminology we've been using are the maximum supportable amounts. And the school board recommendation is to phase that in over time. I believe they're looking at 50% the first year, and then 75 and 100 are the percentages. So that concludes my presentation. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the presentation? Mr. Clegg, you look like you wish to
I did want to add one comment, which is that there's another reason why the fees are recommended to be levied on a county-wide basis as a uniform fee throughout the county. As the Planning Commission is aware, school concurrency is governed by 163-3180, which is a section of the Community Planning Act. There are some pretty strict requirements in there that the legislature has imposed on local governments in the way that we go about assessing school capacity, and they require the school board to look at that on a county-wide basis. And because of that, in order to be consistent with those statutory requirements, the impact fees need to be levied that way as well. So we don't have the discretion on school impact fees that we have, for example, on road impact fees, where you can differentiate by district. You can't do that because of that language in Florida statutes.
Thank you. And the net result of that, a dollar paid an impact fee could be used anywhere in the county, correct?
That is correct. You do have to make sure that there's still some artful science on the part of the school board to make sure they're spending the money in a way that's benefiting development. But because that a seat created anywhere in the county can in theory be used to provide capacity for pretty much anywhere in the county. It has to be a contiguous district, as you know. So there are some districts that aren't contiguous. As long as you are providing that benefit to property, then yes, you can use it anywhere in the county.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions or comments? Seeing none, Mr. Osborne, I have a question. Who determines the level of service for the schools?
The level of service of the schools is determined by the school board. I believe there's some things that you all do in terms of capacity standards and things like that. Mr. Penley is here to, I think, maybe a better person to address that.
Thank you, Mr. Penley. Thank you.
Morning. We have an interlocal agreement with the county and the cities that determines what that level of service is, and it is also in the comprehensive plan, so we comply with that. But we have, for every development application that we get in, we go through an analysis and calculate the impact that that particular development will have. I have a person that works with me, and she calculates it for every development. And our primary concern is watching to make sure that we don't trigger going over the level of service. So our levels of service are set at 110% for elementary, 105% for middle school, and 100% for high schools. And again, that's in the comprehensive plan and in the interlocal agreement.
Mike, that's fish capacity, right? I mean, that's by,
Actually, that's not fish capacity.
It's not?
Fish capacity is different. Yeah. The state determines the capacity of an individual school. And that's done a little differently. At high schools, it's 90%, no, I'm sorry, 95%. Middle schools is 90%, and elementary schools, that's 100%, and that's something that is dictated to us and we have to comply with. So what that means is, to make it real simple, if you had a high school of 2,000 student stations at 95%, we can only get 1,900 students in that high school. So the state still looks at it as 2,000, but they say you can't seat more than 1,900.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any additional questions? Okay, thank you, Mr. Osborne. We're going to go to public comment now. So if there's, I've only have one person signed up to speak, but regardless, if you wish to make a statement after Mr. Goff, if you would, please step up and please state your name for the record. It's not legislative, there's legislative. Yeah.
I don't want to start until everyone has a copy of what I'm passing out.
Mr. Goff, for the record, if you could, please state your name.
My name is Edward Goff, and I am a resident taxpayer in Manatee County
Thank you.
and a concerned citizen. I am opposed to the resolution as presented by the school board for the following reasons. The school system needs all the funding that it can get for the new schools. As you just heard, 6 new schools are going to be required within the next 5 to 10 years, as determined by Tischler-Bice. Tying the passage of a yet-to-be-determined referendum to the school impact fee, I think is a very unwise idea. The school board members were to consider only the school impact fee as per the agenda and not anything to do with a referendum. The concept of linking the school impact fee to an unknown referendum was introduced after public comment. It is probably not legal to consider an issue without allowing public comment first. School board members were not given adequate time to consider all aspects of the resolution. For example, there was no consideration of property tax consequences or what-if considerations. And there's a table here that I would like you to look at. I don't have time to discuss that, but I hope you'll have some look at that and have some questions after I have finished my 3 minutes. The increased cost of a home buyer to a home buyer would be minimal. A $250,000 single-family detached home would increase the mortgage rate by 81 cents a day. 81 cents a day. So the developers have said it would be a real hardship. I don't think 81 cents a day would be a hardship on anyone who can afford a $250,000 home. There is no reason why the school impact fee should not be paid 100%. Impact fees have a positive impact on the economy. Unlike you may have heard that impact fees have a negative impact on the economy, they have a positive impact. So this is the table I made for a $250,000 home. I used amortization tables from bankrate.com online, and it shows that it would only be 81 cents a day, which is $24.73 a month. And I worked this out on an annual basis. And the last document explains the impact fee, how the impact fee actually stimulates the economy and doesn't have a negative impact on it. Are there any questions? There's a lot of information there. And
Thank you, Mr. Goff. Thank you.
no questions? I hope you.
Is there anybody else?
I hope you read and understand that all before you make your decision.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to make a statement regarding the educational facility impact fees? Anyone? Okay. Seeing nobody else come forward. All right. We're going to close the public comment portion of this. And just one clarification. I think there was some discussion regarding the use of the fee. Is it my understanding that the money collected for impact fees has to be used in a specific period of time, or it has to be returned? Is that correct?
There are some things in the statute, sir, that do reflect that the impact fees have to be used in a certain amount of time. That is correct.
Okay. All right. Are there any additional questions, comments, concerns, anything?
I'd like to make a comment.
Mr. Rhodes?
Similar to the county fees that, the study that we had and was before us last month and approved by the county commissioners, I know a lot of time and effort on many parts, including the inputs and the fees and all of the public discussion on this. I'm aware that the school impact fees ended in 2009, where the county did have theirs continuing. And by 2009, I think the school missed out on a lot of opportunity with what we have called the housing boom, luckily, in Manatee County for those years. And associated with that, we have a growing unfunded capital improvement program for the schools that there's no funding for, as we continue to read in the paper. So before us today, we finally have a good impact fee potential, but it's at the $5,700 mark, which I still think isn't really good enough to try to catch up with the stopping of the fees in 2009. And what I would have liked to have seen is possibly have it mirror what the county did for the county impact fees, which is a $80,000, $90,000, which does phase it in to see exactly what's happening each year to some of the negatives people have been citing, whether it's real or unrealistic at this time. So personally, I'd like to see it move to an 80, 90, 100 to mirror what the county did on the county impact fees.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Mr. Rutledge.
I just wanted to say thanks to Mr. Gall for such a thoughtful and prepared analysis for us. We get a lot of communication, and I just appreciate it. I'm kind of new at the board, and so this kind of approach helps educate me, and I appreciate it. I just wanted to make that comment today.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I just quickly
Mr.
make
Clegg.
a comment so the Planning Commission understands? We have an interlocal agreement, a separate interlocal agreement with the school board to get to this point. Because unlike the county's impact fees, the impact fees for schools require the cooperation of two completely separate elected governments. The reason for that is the county does not own school infrastructure. We don't provide those services. So to meet the requirements for an impact fee study, you have to go to the school board to get their data, their analysis, and they need to weigh in on the study and the needs. So that interlocal agreement that we crafted last spring and executed, I think in June, says that they will adopt a resolution accepting their study and making a recommendation and then passing it through, and then we will schedule hearings before the Planning Commission and then the board. And so what you see today reflects what they recommended. That's the way we agreed to do it. That's really the way you have to do it to keep the process moving. When this gets to the board can have a dialogue about whether to accept all of the school board's recommendation or part of it or change it. There is discretion to do that. It's not a legally binding recommendation on the board, and I explained that to the school board when they adopted their resolution. The issue is the further they depart from it, it does carry weight in the process. It carries significant weight from a legal standpoint and a political standpoint, but it's not necessarily binding. But for purposes of the Planning Commission, I would ask that, while I understand the concerns being raised, and we'll have to have a dialogue about that when this goes to the board in the land use meeting next month, that's not really a comprehensive plan issue, because the comprehensive plan doesn't go into the details of how much is the fee going to be. That's an issue that has to be worked out as a fiscal policy decision. I hope the commissioners understand that.
Thank you. Mr. Clegg, also for clarification, if the board has an opinion different than, the Board of County Commissioners have an opinion different than the school board had regarding the implementation, does it have to go back to the school board?
No, and there was a time early on when the school impact fees mirrored the school board's recommendation, but then at one point, the Board of County Commissioners, I don't remember if it was 06 or 05, they actually raised them to the maximum amount permitted under the study without the school board's recommendation to do so.
Okay.
It's a little bit of a counterintuitive process because you have multiple governments that have to be involved in it. The real legal constraint is the study.
Okay.
You have to operate within the framework of the study, or you have real legal risks. I mean, you just can't levy an impact fee outside of the parameters of the study.
Okay, thank you very much.
So just for clarification, so our actions today are sort of limited by the directions we could go, so we're really looking to accept it and.
Well, we're just looking for your
partially
recommendation that it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. And that goes to the assumptions that were made in the study and the way that they looked at the concurrency issues and the things that Mr. Guthrie explained to you a moment ago. And the board will have to have a dialogue about the numbers and whether or not to accept the school board's recommendation verbatim.
Thank you, thank you. Are there any additional comments, questions, or concerns?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bauer?
Just so today, if I'm in agreement as well that I would like to see an 80, 90, 100 incremental proposal versus what's in here, but today we're simply saying that it conforms with the comprehensive plan.
I think that feeling needs to be stated independent of your finding with regard to the item before us.
Which would be fine.
Yes.
As long as it's not part of the motion, I think for the actual recommendation on the ordinance, that's fine. If the Planning Commission frequently adds those kinds of comments or concerns as separate dialogue to the board, and you certainly have the discretion to do that
Right.
with this item as well.
Right, that would be a narrative, just a request or a additional narrative for the
Understood.
Board of County Commissioners to consider.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Horgan?
Yeah, I guess I would echo the same concerns, and so if there's a comment that the board wants to consider from the Planning Commission when they make their decisions, we're not a part of that decision-making process, but they should sort of know what we're feeling. Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Knapp, I failed to ask you to read this item into the record, so for the record, would you please read it?
Ordinance 1603, Educational Facility Impact Fees. An ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Manatee County, Florida, regarding educational facilities, providing a statement of purpose and intent, providing findings, amending Chapter 29, Article 7 of the Manatee County Code of Ordinances, adopting a new schedule of educational facility impact fees effective as of April 18th, 2016, based on the most recent impact fee study completed by the Manatee County School Board in accordance with the Florida Impact Fee Act, amending and restating Chapter 29, Article 7 of the Code, impact fees, educational facilities, to provide for a title, authority, and applicability, to provide for legislative findings, reliance upon the impact fee study, and intend to provide definitions, to provide rules and construction, to provide determination of amounts of impact fees, to provide for impact fees to be imposed, to provide methods of payments of impact fees, to provide for use of impact fee funds, to provide for refunds of impact fees paid, to provide for exemptions and credits against impact fees, to provide for appeals, to provide ordinance review requirements, and to provide for enforcement, providing for applicability, providing for codification, providing for severability, providing for notice of the new and amended impact fees in accordance with the Florida Impact Act, and providing an effective date.
Thank you very much. All right, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. DeLesline.
I move to recommend the approval of ordinance 1603 per the recommendations motion in the staff report attached to the agenda memo.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Lakowiak. There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Those opposed? Seeing none, item passes. Thank you. We're going to move on to the regular agenda. I know there's probably going to be some shuffling around, but in the meantime, we're going to go to item number 2, the minutes for approval from our November meeting. The chair will entertain a motion to accept, or
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes for approval of November 12th, 2015.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Second by Mr. Bauer. All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Those opposed, like sign. Seeing none, it passes unanimously. All right, our next item on the agenda is item number 3. Mr. Bauer, is that the item you wish to pull from consent?
It is.
Okay. So we're gonna pull that from the consent, and that being the only item on the consent agenda, we're gonna move to the regular agenda and hear this item. So, Ms. Knapp, if you would, please read this into the record. Yes, ma'am.
Probably go ahead and swear everyone in.
Oh, yes. I love these time-certain events. It messes everything up. If you would, please rise. If you plan to speak on any item today, please rise and be sworn in. If you don't do it now, you're gonna have to do it at a later time.
Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and factual representations which you're about to present to this board will be truthful and accurate? I do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for keeping me on track.
The applicant is entitled to 15 minutes for presentation and 5 minutes for individuals may speak for 3 minutes, and anyone representing a group or organization of 5 or more members may speak for 10 minutes. If you represent a group, please state the group you represent and provide written authority to speak on behalf of the group. When you step to the podium, please state your name and whether or not you've been elected.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Horrigan.
have an ex parte disclosure to make.
Okay. Yes, please.
Prior to getting the agenda, I happened to stop in the sales center for this project, sort of looking around. I was passing by. And during the conversation, the salesperson started to say to me, we're going to go for an approval for something. And I said, before you say anything else, I'm on the planning commission and I can't hear anything that you have to say. So there was no discussion about what they were planning, but that conversation did occur.
Thank you, Mr. Horrigan. Ms. Schenk, is that, there's no concern there, is there?
No, you just have to disclose it on the record.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, Ms. Knapp, if you would, please read the item into the record.
PDR 1512P, Stone Creek Homes LLC, Rhinacita Phase 2. An ordinance of the Board of County Commissioners of Manatee County, Florida regarding land development, providing a preliminary site plan for 24 lots for single-family attached residence in the PDR, Planned Development Residential Zoning District, on approximately 4.78 acres on the north side of Cortez Road, approximately a quarter-mile west of Palmasola Boulevard, commonly known as 9090 Cortez Road West, Bradenton.
Thank you, Ms. Knapp. Good morning. If you could, please, would you make your introduction to this project?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and other members of the Planning Commission. I am Stephanie Moreland, and I have been sworn. This morning, the applicant is here, and I'm going to have them come forward. The supervisor just read the introduction, so I'm going to have the applicant come forward and give their presentation, followed by staff's presentation. Before the applicant comes forward, we had a public comment this morning. I'd like to turn that in, please.
Thank you, Ms. Moreland. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and Planning Commissioners. My name is Rachel Layton. I'm the Director of Planning at ZNS Engineering, and I have been sworn this morning.
Thank you.
We are here today seeking approval of a preliminary site plan for 24 single-family attached housing units on 4.78 acres. The project history is a long one. It's been 12 years in the making. The first judgment on the property allowed for a density of 12 dwelling units per acre, and the most recent preliminary site plan that had been approved, which was PDR 0342, allowed for 44 multifamily homes. So we're significantly reducing the density for what we're proposing today. So I'm gonna kind of give you an orientation on the property itself. So here on I've got an aerial map, and you can see our property is highlighted in red. The project, again, is 4.78 acres, and we're on the north side of Cortez, the west side of Palmasola Trace Boulevard, and south of Palmasola Bay. We're about 850 feet away, and our property lines don't touch any of the preserved area there. There are no wetlands on site. We had environmental consultants review the property, walk the property. After Phase 2 had actually been envisioned with the 44 multifamily homes, there had been some clearing and grubbing of the site. This pond that you see in the middle of the property was created in the 1970s, so that's an other surface water. It's not a wetland on that property. And here you can see Phase 1 of Rhinacita with some of the homes under construction. The future land use map shows a variety of different designations out here, the predominant one being residential 6. The property itself has a residential 6 category, and surrounding we have ROR, Res 9, Res 16, MUC, AC1, and Res 6. So these are all higher density categories for the future land use. Res 6 maximums for this property, in particular, the maximum gross residential density is 6 dwelling units per acre. With our proposed project, we're proposing a density of 5.02 gross dwelling units per acre. So that's 22 units on the 4.78 acres. And again, that's less than what had been previously approved. With this application, we're requesting special approval for all projects with a gross residential density exceeding 4.5 dwelling units per acre. And again, we're proposing 5.02, which is allowable under the future land use category. And again, those previous approvals the first one allowed for 12, and the most recent one allowed for 9. So this is a significant reduction in density for this project as envisioned. The comprehensive plan also requires special approval for a project located within a coastal evacuation area overlay and the Coastal High Hazard Overlay District. So I know the map looks a little bit busy here with all these overlays out here, but what that means is we did a little bit additional review with all of this. So one of the things one of the considerations is density, another is evacuation times and having an emergency management plan, which we submitted to the Emergency Management Division and they approved. The closest shelter is Seabreeze Elementary. It's about a mile, 1.9 miles away, maybe 5 minutes if, I know that would change during an emergency time. And again, the reduced density helps meet that goal of the comprehensive plan for the coastal evacuation and coastal high hazard areas. The property zoning is planned development residential. Again, there have been a number of approvals previously on that property. And this area is primarily planned development residential. We've got a number of other commercial designations along the frontage. We've got general commercial here for the storage. We've got neighborhood commercial medium here for I believe there's a shopping center. And so there's a variety of designations on this street that show a transition of density and intensity along the road. Nearby densities range from 2.4 and 3 dwelling units per acre, and that's these residential subdivisions. We also have some condominiums that are located here, Palmasola Harbor and Waterways, that have higher densities, although they're such older projects, we had a hard time between staff and I trying to determine what the actual densities of those projects were. So I wanted to show the preliminary site plan that was approved previously. They actually went through engineering drawings on the site as well. And what they had proposed at that time was connection through the Phase 1 project with their access onto Cortez Road and then 44 units around the existing pond. And again, that was 44 dwelling units. So it was much higher density and it was also multifamily. What we're proposing is single-family attached units. So here is our new site plan. And again, we're using that connection that's existing on Cortez Road. And they'll have access through that gated entrance and they'll connect through to the east and then they'll have this longer cul-de-sac. This cul-de-sac does meet the requirements of the Land Development Code. So you can see we've got 8 buildings here and they're proposed with 3 units each. And again, the gross density is 5.02 dwelling units per acre, and the net density is 5.53 dwelling units per acre. And that's because we've got this nice amenity center that'll be shared between both phases. That's about 0.44 acres. We've also expanded the stormwater pond at the front of the site to enhance that buffer and pull the development further away from Cortez Road. Along Cortez Road itself, we have a 20-foot utility easement and then a 20-foot roadway buffer. And again, then we have the pond and we have the amenity center before we have those first buildings. So we're fairly well set back off the street. I also want to talk about the setbacks here. In Phase 1, there's 20-foot front yard setbacks, and we're also requesting that for consistency for Phase 2. The side yard setbacks will be 0 and 8 feet, and the rear yard setback is 10 feet. What we have for buffers along the rear of the property lines here is 25 feet, where 15 feet is required by the code. And I want to kind of go back to the multifamily and the single family and the attached units that are all out here in this neighborhood. This really provides a nice transition and builds a strong community, which is encouraged by Comprehensive Plan Objective 2.9.1. The open space requirement itself for this property is 25%. What we're proposing is 42%. So it's just over an acre that's required, and we're proposing almost 2 of the 4.78 acres as open space. Again, the proposed amenity center is 4.4 acres in size and may include a pool and clubhouse. And again, that will be shared with Phase 1. There are homeowners' documents that allow for all of the development as it's proposed for the shared access of utilities and roadways and recreational facilities. Sidewalks are proposed on both sides of the internal street. Sidewalks exist along the north side of Cortez Road, and there's actually a bus stop right out in front of the development itself. So that helps us with the multimodal design in the comprehensive plan as well. Utilities include an 8-inch potable water main and a 4-inch diameter force main, and these are internal to the project and available for connection. These are private utilities as consistent with the comprehensive plan and land development code because this is in the coastal evacuation and coastal high hazard area. Traffic impact statement was approved by Manatee County. The proposed project has 19 p.m. peak hour trips, so it's a very minor addition to the overall road out there for Cortez Road, which is a principal arterial road. Manatee County School District provided confirmation that available capacity exists in Service Area 4 for elementary, middle, and high schools. The schools include Seabreeze Elementary School, Sugg Middle School, and Bay Shore High School. We've worked closely with staff throughout the process, and the request has received a positive staff report. We're in agreement with all of the stipulations that are proposed by staff. The project is compatible with development in the area and was designed to meet the requirements of the Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code. It's a logical progression of residential development as well as being an infill project. We respectfully request the Planning Commission recommendation for approval of this request, and I'm happy to entertain any questions. I also have Stone Creek Homes representatives here as well as engineering staff to answer any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Slayton, the graphic on the screen
Yes.
shows the first building on the left as you come in doesn't have a identified side yard. Is that,
Correct.
that's on the lot line?
Both phases are owned by the same developer, so we're allowed to propose that in accordance with the Land Development Code.
Okay. So that area between the two units, the existing unit and the proposed unit, is a common area?
Yes, it's a common area.
So you're dealing with building separation at that point?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. One additional question. You said that this was previously approved as a PSP through
Yes.
the public hearing process.
Yes.
And did I understand you to say that they had gone through construction drawing review?
They had, and they actually started to clear all of the land.
Were those, I presume if they were clearing the land, that those drawings were approved?
They were.
Are they still valid approvals?
They're not. The final site plan and concurrency approvals expired.
Expired, okay. So they still, if they chose, they could go back to the old plan, submit applications without public hearing, and
Correct.
get approval and begin constructing the previously approved plan?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Are there any additional questions for,
Mr. Chair?
yes, ma'am.
I'm not clear on the questions you made on the previously approved plan. There was some litigation involving the previously approved plan. The RLS submitted to our office data asked for opinions on the previously approved plan, but the density would be significantly higher. I'm not saying it would not require another public hearing, it would require a legal opinion as well. We haven't done that because we weren't asked to do that.
I'm not sure I understand. Are you saying the previously approved PSP is not valid?
Well, I was led to believe it had expired. That's why they were going through this.
Well, there were construction drawings that were approved previously. So I think what the chair was saying was that if it followed suit with the old PSP, I think his question was, would the final site plan be able to be reinstated?
Okay, well, there would be a process for that. When it requires public hearing, I don't know at this point. We weren't asked to opine on the prior litigation.
Okay, all right. And for the record, that is the applicant's opinion, not staff, so, thank you. Mr. Horrigan.
I had a question. What was your comment about the cul-de-sac? What's the length of that cul-de-sac?
Oh, it's under 800 feet.
It's under 800.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rhodes.
Yes, if, looking at the preliminary site plan that's up, I'm trying to get just a little picture of the whole property. As I come in the drive and go immediately straight and then to the left, that's what we might have called phase one?
Correct.
Going back?
That's correct.
And those are the single-family homes?
They're not single-family homes. They're paired units.
Oh, they're paired
And
units.
I have a copy of the plat if you'd like to see that.
Oh, and then how many of those units are there now?
There are 16.
16?
Well, there are 16 lots there. I believe there's 6 or 8 of the structures have been completed.
Okay, so that portion has never been completed, even though it was phase one over all these years?
It was phase one, and it has been platted, and they have the right to construct those units.
As they originally are?
Correct.
Okay. And in your knowledge, as we look at phase two, was it the original intent of the overall phase one and two of this site to use the shared
Yes,
entryway?
yes, and I'll go back to the slide for what the previous preliminary site plan was. And you can see here that the access is the same.
There it is, okay.
To come in off Cortez Road and make that right turn into the subdivision. And having cross-access between projects is something that the comprehensive plan also encourages.
Yes, right. I just wanted to see if originally the people that bought on
Yes.
phase one
And I have a
knew that there was
copy-
going to be a single entryway for the whole
I have
project.
a copy of the plat as well. I can show that to you quickly.
Okay, if you would.
So you can see on the plat, here's the main entrance, and it was always envisioned to connect over to the eastern parcel.
And this is phase one that you're showing.
That's correct. That's the plat, recorded plat for phase one.
Okay, and of all of those sites, just to reiterate, only about 6 of those sites have been constructed.
Oh, so I'm looking at my client in the audience. He says there have been 10 of those units
10
constructed.
of those, okay, have been completed.
Ms. Layton, on this plat you have on the screen, I have a question. Did the preliminary plat that was previously approved include the property that is now before us?
No, they've always been different, separate phases.
Okay.
They've never been brought in as one entire project.
It wasn't part of the boundary. This will be a completely new
Correct.
plat. Okay,
Correct.
thank you.
And last comment then, so on the phase 2, what had been approved PSP, but has expired, was approved for 44 home sites.
Correct.
And,
the-
or not home sites, but 44 residences. And now we're down to 24.
That's
This
correct.
proposal.
We're 24.
The statement that the preliminary plat, or the PSP has expired has not yet been completely determined. I think
Okay.
the construction plans, for clarifications, typically construction plans have an expiration. Preliminary plats, the zoning on the property may not. That's something we'll have to get clarification from staff when they speak.
What I was trying to get at, more important, expired or not, it was for 44 units.
That's
And now
correct.
we're reducing it to 24.
To 24.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Rutledge? You're done. I'm sorry, you're out of time.
Not quick enough.
Yeah. Mr. Rutledge?
I just wanted to confirm something you said. They said that there was no issues with the association documents. This is going to be a combined association.
Yes, the homeowners association documents were originally done in 2005 and envisioned this. The homeowners documents called it a park parcel. I'm not sure why they titled that, but in the definition of park parcel, they refer to the eastern parcel and the future development of the eastern parcel. And those homeowners documents reference shared access, shared utilities.
So there's no conflict or there's no dispute that you're aware of with the holder of the association's activities currently with this development?
I'm not sure I understand the correct.
I want to be careful to say, because I don't know who the controller of the homeowners association is, but my question is
It would be the
whoever's-
developer,
It is the developer.
yes.
So they have the prerogative to do this under those documents.
Yes.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions
Mr. Chair?
for the applicant? Yes, Mr. Bauer?
I'd like to hear the applicant's response to Dr. Paneras' letter on a few of his concerns. So, I guess regarding the HOA, his main concern was hoping that the development would continue in phase 1. At some point in the near future, the HOA would be turned over to the homeowners.
I can't speak to the legal questions of the homeowners documents as a planner. I'm not qualified to really answer that. I can bring the developer up to try to speak to some of these, but
I would like to hear the response to his letter and some of his concerns.
Mr. Bauer, specifically, what was the issue?
1, 2, 3, and 4. He addressed concerns in 1, 2, 3, and 4 in his letter, and I'd like to find out what they have to say about that.
Okay, we'll allow this to be addressed in rebuttal. So
Okay.
Give the applicant some time to form a response.
And then my only other concern was with the necessary fill that I have to go in. I know you had a stormwater pond, retention pond in the front, but what about the runoff to the back that will lead to Palmasola Bay?
the design of the buffers, we'll be creating a little bit of a swale in those buffers, and everything will be directed back to that front pond. So the property owner will have to bring in fill to make that design work. We haven't
That
finished the
happened.
engineering design, though.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Okay, are there any other questions for the applicant before we bring staff up for their presentation? Okay, seeing none, Ms. Moreland, if you would, please, if you would, make staff's presentation.
Good morning, Stephanie Moreland, representing staff. Presentation, please. The request today, as it was read, is for approval of a preliminary site plan for 24 lots for single-family attached residences. That is at a density of 5.02 dwelling units per acre. Ms. Layden showed you the location of the site. It is on Cortez Road on the north side. It's a quarter mile west of Palmasola Boulevard. Under the history, the Board of County Commissioners approved the preliminary site plan for 44 multifamily units at a density of 9.21 dwelling units per acre. That approval has expired. The site is in the Res 6 future land use category. It's also in the coastal high hazard area and coastal evacuation area. And special approval is required by the comprehensive plan for a gross density exceeding 4.5 dwelling units in Res 6 future land use category. Also, special approval is required for a project in the CEA and the coastal high hazard area. The site is in the PDR zoning district. The gross acreage for the project is 4.78 acres. The site is in an AE base flood elevation of 10 or 11. There are no wetlands and no wetland impacts. The site will utilize county water and sewer. This is the preliminary site plan that she just showed you. It shows the access connecting to Cortez Road. The 20-foot wide roadway buffer is proposed with a 6-foot high fence. There are 25-foot wide perimeter buffers. There's a 5-foot concrete wide sidewalk, and there's concrete sidewalks along Cortez Road. 0.44 acres is allotted for recreational amenities, and the maximum height of the building is proposed to be 35 feet. Shared access is proposed with the existing Cortez subdivision, which is the subdivision in discussion, and that subdivision is also called Rhinoceta Phase 1, and that is to the east of the site. These are the setbacks that are proposed, and specific approval is required for a reduced front yard setback to 20 feet. This is Cortez Road looking east, Cortez Road looking west, and you can see the sign in front of the property. This is the entrance at Cortez Road West to the existing subdivision and also proposed for the new subdivision. And here's the inter-neighborhood tie that is constructed, and this is our site in this area here. This is the site again. This is the western boundary of the site. That shows once again the western boundary, and also this is the roadway buffer that is existing for Cortez subdivision. To the south, we have across Cortez Road, we have single-family residences. And then we have single-family residences also in Coral Shores. To the west, we have single-family attached residences in the Cortez subdivision. I'm sorry, that is single-family semi-detached residences in the Cortez subdivision. And single-family, that was an error there, sorry. And to the east of the site, we have vacant land. Under positive aspects, the site is in an area where there are a mix of commercial and residential uses. The site was previously approved for residential development, and the site may be considered appropriate infill residential use. 42% open space is being provided, 25% is required. Under negative aspects, we have more residences in the coastal evacuation area. The proposed development, as a mitigating factor, the proposed development completes the previously approved project. The density proposed is within the threshold for the Res 6 future land use category. Staff recommends approval.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Anyone? I have one question, Mr. Gerstenberger. The stormwater runoff from any improvement, they'll be required to capture that runoff, correct?
For the record, Mr. Chair, and I'll go ahead and provide this for the record. Thomas Gerstenberger, Public Works Department, I have been sworn. Mr. Chair, that would be correct. The construction plan, final site plan associated with this project would have to demonstrate that the drainage and grading plan provides internal routing of the stormwater runoff from the proposed residential dwelling units and associated infrastructure of this project.
And again, there would be no, the water captured would be treated as state water quality standards and then discharged to the appropriate location. I presume it would be toward the bay in this project. But with that being understood, there's no direct runoff. It's not going to run off and just sheet flow to the bay. It's going to have to be picked up, either ditch, swale, structure, and then routed to the pond, even if it's on the opposite side of from the pond. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. The intent shown on the preliminary site plan indicates that there would be proposed drainage piping. I think also the applicant brought up the use of drainage swales to collect and convey that runoff to the retention pond, which is shown on the southern portion of this project. I would also include that this project is required to provide 150% water quality treatment, as the discharge to this project would go to Palmasola Bay, which is classified an outstanding Florida water.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any additional questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, we're going to go to the public comment portion of the hearing. I've got a couple folks signed up to speak, so if you would, when I call your name, please step up to the microphone, state your name and that you have been sworn. You'll have 3 minutes to make your statement. The first person who signed up to speak is Christine Panaris. If you would, please step up and good morning.
Hello, good morning. You've read our letter.
I'm sorry, if again.
My name is Christine Panaris,
And you have been sworn?
and I have been sworn.
Thank you very much.
And you've read my letter it's from Dr. and Mrs. Christine Panaris, correct? What I want to discuss, since you've read my letter already, I have a problem with the second phase. First of all, they are going to be using our road for this new construction. Our HOA is not intact. We're having a lot of problems with it. The original site plan that is approved by this commission included sharing this private road and gate, which is 92nd Lane. And it was approved because the original developer had created this association for both communities, so the expenses related to maintenance would be shared. Well, our association, the declarant, the owner, is not paying into the association. We're paying for the gate and the road. So he wants to build these homes, and he's not paying for any of this. And I don't understand why, this would go through until he starts paying for it. So until he starts paying for dues and the homeowner's dues, and this association becomes intact again, and he starts, that's basically our concern, is that he's not paying the homeowners association dues and overages. This community has gone high and dry. We've had a lot of builders come through. The association, the homeowners association, has been drained many times. There have been loans taken out. When we moved in a year ago, we were told that everything was fine with this association. And, why they're building more houses when they can't sell the 4 that they have right now, I don't understand. And then, I know that's me, right? Anyway, I'll make it short and sweet. I'm just opposed to having more buildings built when they can't afford to keep our maintenance up and use our roads. Cortez Road, they need a separate entrance to begin with. They need to use their own entrance and pay for their own gate and their road, not ours. Thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak is Danny Rains. If you could, please step up, state your name, and that you have been sworn, please.
I am Danny Rains. I have been sworn.
Thank you.
My wife and I are residents in Phase 1 of Renacita. I did send the commission a letter. I hope you've had a chance to read that. I would also just like to make a comment that when we purchased in Phase 1 in August of 2014, we were not aware or made aware that there was going to be a Phase 2 that would directly impact Phase 1 by using the existing gate, street, entrance to that parcel. So, good morning, Planning Commission. My wife and I, residents of Renacita, I'm very concerned about the projected referenced project as proposed. We have been retired for 8 years, and our retirement home was in a 50 and over community. In 2011, we lost our 25-year-old daughter and adopted the 2 young granddaughters. Due to the age restrictions within our community, we were forced to purchase a home at another location to raise our granddaughters. We felt Renacita offered a safe, nice environment to raise the girls, though we used all of our retirement money to buy the house. It is in our best interest to protect the investment that we made along with the other homeowners. Therefore, our objections are the 24 homes on the parcel are supposedly considerably smaller than ours, though I don't know exactly what those home sizes are. Our home sizes current homes are from 37 to 4,400 square feet. The community must have conformity and commonality to protect the investment of the homeowners. To allow these, if they are much smaller homes, to be an extension of Renacita would adversely affect the value of our existing homes. I am confident that the County Commission would not approve a plan which would certainly affect the value of our existing homes if there was another option to consider. The developer is proposing to attach Phase 2 to our existing community for using our entrance and gate, and therefore controlling our HOA in our community for a number of years. This would be a nightmare for future maintenance fees with the various sizes, shapes of lots. We understand and support community development It creates jobs, increases the tax base. But but to allow construction equipment, vehicles, employees, etc., to enter our community for the sole purpose to build another development which would adversely affect our property. So therefore, the solution to this situation, and we want to see the developer succeed, is to install another entrance from Cortez Road to provide ingress and egress to this community.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next person signed up to speak is Sia. Yeah, thank you very much. If you would,
Easy for
please.
you.
Yeah.
Good morning.
If you would, please
My
state
name
your
is
name.
Sia Malagnasi. I've been already sworn in, and thank you for the opportunity to talk with you guys. And I just to reiterate my fellow homeowners that concerns here that we feel that the second phase, first of all, when they're talking about phase 1 and phase 2, let's go back to the history. Phase 1 portion of it was a few lots that were remaining from the original builder that hadn't been completed. So this new builder bought those lots in May of 2014. In October of 2014, he decided to buy the adjacent lot and subsume both into a single development. We don't have any issue with developing the site. The problem is he's proposing to build much smaller homes that would significantly impact the value of our existing homes if they're all combined and subsumed into a single subdivision. If they're separate, we're still going to be affected because we are adjacent to that site. But it's not going to be as bad because conformity applies across the board. Secondly, when they talk about phase 1, that was completely different subdivision. 12 years ago, that design was put in front of you. And they say, okay, that was approved. But that was a completely different thing. It has been through several investors and several builders who came and took portions of this and they were sold to different people. And now they are trying to assemble it again and use the rule for the 10 years ago and say, okay, we can extend. That's fine. If you want to extend, that's okay. But originally, it was envisioned that these will be 3,700, minimum of 3,700 square feet home. How come we are not looking at what was required for the size of the home, but we are looking at, oh, potentially there was an access that was common to both sides. So therefore, we feel that we have no problem developing that site. If you want to make it part of the same subdivision, make it the same size home so you don't adversely affect the value of homes. That's one thing. Secondly, if you want to make a smaller home, why not provide a second entrance, completely separate entrance, one reducing traffic to our neighborhood. There is no need for our neighborhood to be exposed to additional traffic and, exposing our elderly pets and children to additional traffic, and it will be basically another 5 to 10 years of more construction, traffic, more dirt, more everything, exposing us, which have already paid. Some of us have paid over $1 million for our home. These homes going to be about 1/3 to a half a size. The value probably going to be appropriately 1/3 of the value. So you put yourself in our position. Would you want to be in a house that you pay over $1 million and somebody come and build a home for $200,000 right next to you? So we need to really think about this. It's going to erode the value of our homes, and also it's going to erode the tax basis of the county. We would love to see that place develop. I have no problem with that, and my neighbors have no problem with that. But the problem is that development, first of all, is going to be at our expense. Secondly, they're using the infrastructure that we paid for, we put in place, and the plan that the original builder had put together 12 years ago was for a complete development, not for piecemeal that is going to benefit only the builder. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are the folks who have signed up to speak, but is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to speak? If you would, please step up, state your name, and that you have been sworn.
Good morning. My name is Shay Hawkenberry, and I have not been sworn in.
Okay.
Is there anyone else? Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and factual representations which you're about to present to this board will be truthful and accurate?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I'm a real estate broker, and I have been involved with this property for many years. I was the one that sold the property to this current developer and sold many of the homes to these residents that are here speaking today. I represent one of them as their property manager. So I just wanted to speak on their behalf because I had the most knowledge of it. And I was actually on the secretary of the Homeowners Association for this particular association. I did resign several months ago as a result of the condition of the HOA and the disparity between the declarant and their responsibilities and the homeowners. So I'm here only to speak that this is a good development. I'm sure the residents want this piece developed. Everybody in the community does. I certainly do as a real estate broker as well. The only concern for the residents is the sharing of the HOA, because currently the HOA for Phase 1 is declarant controlled, and they feel like they are not abiding by the declarant's responsibilities for maintaining the roads, maintaining the development itself, and by adding this subdivision into this association when they're already not fulfilling the responsibilities of Phase 1 will drastically affect them. The second thing is with sharing the roads and the gate. They feel they're paying for the roads, they're paying for the gate right now with their maintenance fees, and to share the community, the road and gate with this new subdivision is going to adversely affect them. So their only concern is that this development be approved with a separate entrance gate. Remember, the original development that you guys approved was called Gulfview Park. This subdivision was called Cortez Subdivision. They were two separate and distinct, and that's all they're asking is that continue to be separate and distinct, and that they have their own entrance and roadways, and that they pay for the maintenance of those. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Bauer,
I have a question.
if you would, please.
When they purchased these homes, do you know what they're aware of or what they were not aware of in terms of what was disclosed to them in terms of the property next door to them?
Well, when they purchased these homes, this developer had not bought that parcel yet. So I don't think it was disclosed to them. I actually sold that parcel to this developer as well. So I had knowledge that they were in process of looking at it. And my knowledge that I shared with each of these homeowners was what I knew, and that is the original development plan for Gulfview Park subdivision was a separate subdivision. It was going to be smaller units. I did, discuss that openly with everyone. However, it was going to have the amenity package for these residents to use. Originally, it was going to be one full subdivision that would be shared. They would be sharing the amenity package. They'd have one master HOA, and they would share in all the expenses. But this developer chose, and you see in the site plan, not to include an amenity package and not to do anything really to incentivize or bring the two communities together. So that's the concern with these homeowners they're not going to be sharing, they're not going to be benefiting. In fact, it could have a negative impact on the values of their properties, as well as, again, the sharing of the roads and the gate that they personally are paying for right now.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hockenberry. Mr. Horgan.
When these people purchased their properties.
Before we get into this, I'd like a clarification from the county attorney's office. We've talked about things that aren't under our purview. We talked about disclosures for closings, and we're talking about HOAs. And I want to get the county attorney's office input regarding these elements. I think these are issues that we're not allowed to make rulings on.
What the Plan Commission has before today is a preliminary site plan review. So we don't consider internal disputes with HOA members or whether developers are fulfilling their roles. It's only the concept plan, it's a preliminary site plan, consists of the concept plan and land development code.
Mm-hmm.
What was interesting, on the Gulfview subdivision, I was looking at the litigation matter. When this matter went to litigation, the Gulfview project was described as having 3 floors or stories over parking, which is a little bit interesting because the density that was proposed back then was much higher than what's proposed now.
Right.
But I'm hesitant to get into the details of it because it was in litigation.
Right.
So now, what you're looking at is what the applicants propose in terms of density consistent with the future lands classification, your comp plan, and your LDC requirements for preliminary site plan review. We can't consider, transportation staff can comment on that access on Cortez Road. That's a legitimate question.
Right, with regard to the disclosures, the HOA issues, those other items, the recommendation would be to seek legal counsel.
But this is not proper for the planning commission to consider
Right,
at this point.
You know, we could empathize, but we can't make a determination regarding those, on those.
Not on those issues, but you can consider internal traffic circulation and access.
I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you. for your
Related to that, again, their concern is not for you guys to get involved in their HOA disputes. It's just they wanted to make you aware. Their concern is utilizing that road and that gate that they are paying for. That's the main issue.
That is something we can have a
Correct.
discussion on, so.
The entrance, the ingress
Thank you.
egress.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Mr. Horgan, I don't want to get into issues regarding the HOA or other things.
I understand that.
Okay.
My only question was, were the residents given copies of the HOA documents when they purchased?
For Cortez subdivision, but not Gulfview Park.
Okay.
Thank you. And again, that sounds like something that's going to take a lot of legwork to figure out, and I don't think we're going to solve that issue here today. Thank you, Ms. Hockenberry. Thank you. All right, is there anybody else? I'm sorry, sir, you've already made your statement. I think we, you can't testify from there. We've got your concerns both in writing and on the record. I would suggest if it's something that needs to be discussed with staff, you could probably relay the, and again, you will have an opportunity to bring your issues in front of the Board of County Commissioners. So just trying to keep the process clean and proper. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wishes to make a public statement? Make a comment? Anybody? Okay, we're going to close the public comment portion of this hearing, and we're going to go to the discussion. Ms. Who would like to do their rebuttal first? I think the staff rebuttal would be appropriate. I've got some questions.
Stephanie Moreland for staff. I just want to reiterate that the density for the site is 5.02. Originally, when it was approved, it was 9.21 dwelling units per acre. It's 5.02, that is within the guidelines of the Res 6 future land use category. As far as the access is concerned, I'm going to let transportation talk about the access, but I'd like to say that Cortez Road is a Florida FDOT road. So they can, deliberate more on that.
Okay.
I do have the documents, the declaration documents here for, I don't wish to go into detail, but I want to say that staff read it and was satisfied that it shows that the access was to be shared.
Okay.
And at this time, I'll just ask for one of my colleagues there to come forward.
Okay, Stephanie, if you refer any documents, you have to enter them into the record with the clerk.
Okay, I'll do that.
And also, could you reference them by name?
This one is Exhibit F, and it says Notice to Buyer.
For which community?
Hang on. And this says it's the Declaration of Protective Covenants for Gulfview Homes, and it's dated 12th day of May 2005 by Gulfview Homes LLC, a Florida limited liability company.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Sure. Mr. Bauer.
A couple questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You can finish. First question was, I keep hearing reference about what was approved before and it's less density now. Is there any, that's expired, correct? So that really
Yes, that
doesn't
is
have any
expired.
relevance
Yes,
for us today?
Right.
Correct.
Exactly.
Well, I had it, the reason I wanted to allude to that, Mr. Bauer, normally I agree with you, it doesn't have any relevance. It might have some legal effect because there was a judgment entered on that old plan,
Okay.
which I didn't want to get into the weeds, so I didn't, but just letting you know, it might have some effect if there's any litigation. That's all I wanted to.
Okay. And then, I'm just thinking, looking ahead, especially for these residents, taking HOA and all that stuff out of it. let's presume for a moment that they can get through the gate and that side street, but for construction purposes, and maybe this is for applicant, I don't know who to ask this to, but I'm thinking for construction purposes, I think it would be nice for this community if there was a different entrance, at least for construction purposes, versus so many hundreds of homes or whatever the numbers of homes are being developed, and the construction people are going straight through this community day in and day out until this is all developed, and how long that might take, I don't know.
And that question, I think, will probably best be answered by staff and as a part of the second access for a separate community. So with that, we'll ask Mr. Gerstenberger and Mr. Davis to please respond.
Good morning. For the record, Clark Davis, Transportation Planning Division Manager, and I have been sworn. As has been discussed, they're proposing access through the existing Cortez subdivision to access the proposed Renacita development. From what we've seen in the covenants and restrictions that were recorded for the Gulfview property, it appears that using the private road as access to the property under consideration was contemplated, it's specified in those covenants and restrictions. So we don't see a reason why they couldn't use it as access, but if for some reason they chose not to, they could go to Florida Department of Transportation and try and seek access to Cortez Road directly, which would be pretty much the only other viable option in this case.
In the authorization to allow a second entrance, or it would be, I guess, an entrance for this new community would be wholly determined by DOT. It's not a county issue. Is that correct?
Getting a little bit outside my area of expertise, but it would, I assume, be some sort of temporary construction access or something like that, which would require a right-of-way use permit from the state to be able to implement. From the plan that's been shown, it appears that they will be constructing 8 3-plex type units, and so it's the equivalent of essentially building 8 large homes, because these things tend to get built together in one building at a time. So I don't see it as a situation where several hundred homes are being built and things like that, where you might think about those kinds of alternate means of access.
Right. Let me ask the question in a different manner. Would the county approve or restrict a fully functional access for this parcel, or is the based on our comprehensive plan and land development code, would this community be required to utilize this second entrance? I mean, this existing entrance. I apologize.
We believe that the instruments are in place to allow them to use the existing access, and we would review the plan and allow them to construct and use a road network that depends on it. If they were to provide an alternate means via Cortez Road, that would require approval by FDOT, but once that's done, we could also approve access via that means. But we would be looking within the 4 corners of the property, not at the access itself.
Right. I maybe, I'm familiar with the process. If this were a county road, we'd have separation distance between driveways. That criteria doesn't apply to this scenario because it's a state road, is kind of what I'm getting at.
The state's criteria in the same regard would apply. So our access management standards would not apply here. It would be the state's.
State's. Okay. All right. That's what I was trying to get to. Okay. A long way to go, but we got there. Okay. Mr. Horgan.
Are our access requirements more stringent or less stringent than the state's?
Ours are typically less stringent. Most of the principal arterials, the major roads in the county where you want to think about maintaining access separation, are state roads, and their standards are higher than the county's in most cases.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Mr. Rutledge.
Yes, sir. Mr. Davis, did you do a trip count on how many at the completion would add to this access gate for those homes?
I believe that the applicant stated for the record that the PM peak hour trip generation was about 15 trips. The daily traffic, without looking at the study, would be about 10 times higher than that. So somewhere in the ballpark of 200 vehicle trips per day going in and out of the main entrance.
And that information is based on a built-out community, not construction traffic, correct?
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that that's clear. There's no analysis required for construction.
Right, it's a temporary condition, and so we think about what the mature development will generate when we evaluate concurrency impacts.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman, can I just make an
Mr.
overall
Rhodes.
comment?
Yes, please.
Just a comment I'd like to make on a side, even though we're not going to vote on that, was brought up today. As far as the residents and their concern on the HOA and the home value, having come from a community who a few years ago also was in your type of situation where it did go bankrupt, and we had the empty lots and we had the developer, the same type of scenario. Our developer, through the HOA, did contribute to his share, and then as homes were built and moved into, that was slowly transferred to the residences. So I think as that works out, I think that is definitely a fair scenario. The other thing we found out is that the home values were affected positively, not by necessarily the size of the home that was being built, but by the completion of the community. Because those empty lots, if somebody is looking, just creates a doubt of what might happen or what might not happen. So I think that a completed community, and I'm sure it will look good, and I guess the reason there's no developer has stepped up for your larger expensive homes is potentially there's no market for it right now. But I just think if you look at the end result and a fair share with the developer, I think everybody could be happy here in a few years.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Applicant, if you would, please make your rebuttal, and as much as possible, speak to the specifics that are relevant to this hearing.
I will. Thank you for the opportunity for rebuttal. I will try to use my 5-minute time frame appropriately. Again, I want to reiterate to the board that the project is in compliance with the Land Development Code and the comprehensive plan. That is first and foremost to start my discussions. We listened to all of those comments and went through the letter, and I want to speak to one item in particular first, is that the developer is agreeable to putting a temporary construction access easement onto Cortez Road during construction period, so that the construction trucks for Phase 2 would not use that primary entrance. So we are agreeable to that. We think that's appropriate. Now, they may see the construction trucks that are still trying to finish Phase 1 come through, but I just want to make that clear that the developer is agreeable to a temporary construction easement onto Cortez Road. We actually did reach out to DOT after we got the first letter from SIA in opposition to the project and asked these questions, and I can't speak directly for DOT, but the way that I understand it is, especially when you have two pieces of property under the same ownership, the DOT encourages one primary drive. When you can't have that, then you have to meet the spacing requirements, and I'm not sure that with a frontage of 374 feet that we would actually meet that DOT spacing requirement on the state road. But I'm staying at, that's my understanding of the DOT rules. I'm not the traffic engineer, and I'm not here to represent FDOT. As to Shay Hockenberry's comments, Shay actually provided me with a copy of the final site plan that I showed you earlier today, so she always knew that the project was to have shared access. I can't speak to whether she actually shared that information when she was showing the properties and closing those deals, or to what information was shared with the homeowners when they closed on their properties. They should have been awarded copies of the Homeowners Association, the declarations, and the notice to home buyers, and if they were doing their due diligence, they would have come to the county and researched what was to be done on that property so that they would have known. I also don't want to really speak to the HOA difficulties because the developer actually did try to reach out and schedule a meeting with the HOA. They had a scheduled meeting for Tuesday. It was canceled. So there are some allegations back and forth. I can say that my understanding is Weston Signature, which is one of the builders for those larger homes, has spent about $50,000 on improvements, and Stone Creek Homes itself has spent over $20,000 on improvements, so they feel that they've significantly improved the site since purchasing it last year. And you can see that from the aerial photographs. It's not just HOA dollars that have gone into it, it's developer dollars as well, especially before you can have that final plat recorded, the developer's the one building the roads, putting in those utilities and those landscape buffers. And that first developer did go bankrupt. It became bank-owned property. Shea Hockenberry was the realtor for the property that sold to Stone Creek Homes, both Phase 1 and Phase 2. Unfortunately, this project became a victim of the economy, and now we're proposing those 24 lots, which is in compliance with Land Development Code. And those HOA documents do propose shared access, as did the plat I showed earlier. And it's in support of the comprehensive plan to have that shared access to limit the access onto a principal arterial. In direct to one of the comments was the size of the homes. The homes have not yet been designed. Yes, the lots are smaller, so the homes would then therefore be smaller than the 3,700 to 4,400 square feet that was represented earlier. I also want to note that the Homeowners Association has an architectural review board. So if the Homeowners Association for both phases stays the same, Phase 1 homeowners would have architectural review board control over Phase 2 design. It would have to be approved by them. But there are documents that actually show that there can be a split to the homeowners associations for each phase. So as they work through their issues, they can decide to split that out and have Phase 1 under separate control homeowners association documents. So in direct response to this letter, and again, I'm responding to a letter that's clearly in opposition of the project, and I can't say that I have not been able to determine that their facts are correct. PDR 0343, which was the site plan I showed earlier, allowed 44 units, and if they had done their due diligence or had been provided that, they would have seen that there were 44 homes proposed for that lot originally. And that plan also showed the shared access. There are 19 PM peak hour trips. Spacing is, we don't believe the spacing is sufficient for 2 access points on Cortez Road for property under the same ownership, which it is right now. It's all under Stone Creek Homes LLC. They say it's difficult to pull out on Cortez Road. We cannot imagine what it would be like to have 100 to 200 additional residents using our gates. We have 24 units. I don't know where they got their number of 200 additional residents. If I might to just rebut the last two items.
Wrap it up quickly.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
For number 3, again, that homeowners association can be separated by phase. Item number 4, they talk about a large pond. There was an environmental report shown, and the design of those increased buffers is to mitigate the relocation of the pond so that any of the animals that are out there now can then migrate to the pond and be relocated. So I hope that sufficiently addresses all of the concerns that were presented today. Again, the project is in compliance with the Land Development Code and the comprehensive plan. And that's really what I believe the board should be considering, and we respectfully request recommendation for approval of the project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions for the applicant?
One.
Mr. Horgan.
You stated that the homeowners association for Phase 1 would have control over the architecture of Phase 2.
That's correct. If it's not
The homeowners
split,
association of Phase 1 is more than likely still under the control of the developer?
that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions for the applicant? I have one question. Who owns the road currently? It's a private road. Who owns it?
It is a private road, so it's under the control of the homeowners association.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, one follow-up question or additional question. These are all fee simple ownerships?
Yes.
Okay. Both Phase 1 and the proposed Phase 2. The previous Phase 2, was that single-family ownership, fee simple ownership, or were those?
I believe so from the way that the lots were laid out in that phase, but I don't know for certain because I wasn't at ZNS when they did that part of the project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Rutledge.
I just have one question. So the reason that, and maybe Mr. Davis is better to answer this, but you're an engineer, so the reason that you have these distance splits is for what reason? Why does DOT set up 500 feet, 1,000 feet from a corner? What's the purpose for that?
I'm actually a certified planner.
Mr. Davis.
So, Mr. Davis, I have an engineer with me from our office,
I
but
guess my
Mr.
point
Davis,
is
I
that
believe,
it's
could
designed
answer that.
because
It's for
of safety
safety.
concerns, right?
It is for safety.
So my question would be, with 200 trips that a high peak are 20 going out of this intersection, are we really safer within a couple hundred feet having people pull out in front and doing that? I mean, if you were designing this and you had your prerogative, would you try and consolidate them and have a single entrance?
That sounds presumptive.
Well, I'm asking the
but-
question. It's done for safety. and
But
that's my
I
question.
think we need to just make the statement that it may be inconsistent with DOT criteria, which is typically a safety criteria. I don't know that Mr. Davis, I don't know that he's ever worked for DOT, but I know that the county, that he might be able to speak to what the county's opinion regarding this, but it is a state road, and from time to time, the state does things you wouldn't normally expect somebody else to do.
My only question would be, I was trying to get to the question of, if you're trying to maintain the safety, because it's not just the people that live there, it's people coming down that road. And what I was trying to get to understand is, as a traffic engineer for the county, would you recommend having separate accesses for 200 trips to go on there, or try and share them with 100 or so trips that are already there? That's, I guess, my question. Is that a fair question?
I'll let Mr. Davis.
Mr. Davis, is that a fair question?
The criteria, the access management rule that was created by the state was for two reasons. One is for safety, and the other is for operational efficiency, so that the interaction of traffic, the friction, if you will, between turning traffic and traffic that's going through on the street. And the more access points you have, the more of those kinds of conflict and friction points you have, and so it tends to degrade the capacity of the road. And so the state, primarily taking care of large arterial roadways, in part was, for lack of a better word, protecting the capacity of the major highways. With that said, for a development this size with less than 100 dwelling units, we'd look to our code and we would allow them to use a single access point. We'd like them to minimize the number of access points they have, and so we would encourage, but not necessarily require, that they have a single access point, and that's from a purely technical perspective. If this were a county road and they came in and proposed a second access, if they could meet our spacing criteria, we would allow them to construct the access point.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Lukowiak.
based upon the staff report, evidence presented, comments made at the public hearing, and finding the request to be consistent with the Manatee County Comprehensive Plan and the Manatee County Land Development Code, as conditioned herein, I move to recommend approval of preliminary site plan PDR 1512 Parent P with stipulations A1 through A4, B1 through B3, C1 and C2, and D1 and D2, granting special approval for a project exceeding a gross density of 4.5 dwelling units per acre in Res 6 future land use category, 2, a project in the coastal evacuation area overlay district, and 3, a project in the CHHA overlay district. Adoption of the findings for specific approvals and granting specific approval for an alternative to Land Development Code Section 402.7.D.7, reducing the reduced front yard setback to 20 feet as recommended by staff.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Lukowiak, second by Mr. Horrigan. Is there any deliberation?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Shank?
did you want us to read a possible stipulation on the construction access easement on Cortez?
It's my understanding that it's a possible, DOT is going to control that, so how would we
Well, if
enforce
it could
that?
read under A5 as a new stipulation, applicant shall use their best efforts to obtain a temporary construction access permit from the Florida Department of Transportation for the construction traffic to access Cortez Road for Phase 2 of the project.
So amended.
Second.
Amended and second, so we have an amended motion. Chair will call a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Those opposed, like sign.
Nay.
Mr. Bauer dissenting. Passes 6-1.
Mr. Chair, again, if you can excuse me, I have a conference call for real life for a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm step away and I'll return to the meeting, Ms. Shank, as soon as I'm able.
That's okay, since next item's legislative anyway.
Okay.
If we do the comp plan
Thank
amendment.
you. So,
in the
public
car.
hearing for that was closed.
Chair.
Yes, and we're going to take a 5-minute break for the benefit of it.
That's why we don't hear them together. One's legislative, the question, one's being continued. Yeah.
question about having Rachel.
All right, we're moving at a record pace today, aren't we? All right, the next item, item number 4. Ms. Knapp, if you could, please read item number 4 into the record.
PA 15-02, ordinance 15-32, Manasara Corp. Tennessee Street Property LLC. Transmittal of a plan amendment of the Board of County Commissioners of Manatee County, Florida regarding comprehensive planning, amending Manatee County Ordinance Number 89-01 as amended, providing a purpose and intent, providing findings, providing for an amendment to the future land use map of the future land use element to designate specific real property from the mixed-use future land use classification, which is 25.5 acres, to the Res 16 future land use classification, property being generally located on the north side of University Parkway between Florida Street on the east and the SCL Railroad on the west and south of Broadway Avenue, Sarasota, Manatee County.
Thank you, Ms. Knapp. Are there any ex parte communication disclosures for this item? Seeing none, we'll move to the introduction by staff. Ms. Tusing, if you could, please introduce this project.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. Margaret Tusing with Building and Development Services. Yes, this project, as Ms. Knapp said, is located north of University Parkway between Florida Street on the east and the Southeast Seaboard Coastline Railroad on the west. The applicants have representatives here today. Stephen Novacki and Valerie Hubbard will do their presentation, and then that will be followed by staff's presentation.
And Mr. Chair, I just had some procedural comments for the record.
Yes, ma'am.
Just to explain, so the item we're hearing right now is a comprehensive plan amendment, which is legislative. And that goes through a longer several-month process because the comp plan goes to the state for review. If it's transmitted by the county commission, comes back for adoption. So there's a certain lag time of a number of months before it becomes effective.
Yes, ma'am.
When that amendment becomes effective, then the plan commission, tentatively scheduled for April, will hear the quasi-judicial component of this, which is number 5.
Okay.
So that's why 5 is being continued. It's just a
Okay.
procedural element.
Okay, thank you. And for the record, anybody wishing to speak on this doesn't need to be sworn because it is
Legislative.
legislative, not quasi-judicial. Okay, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you, Margaret. And for the record, and as Margaret said, my name is Stephen Novacki. I'm the developer representative for this project. Initially put this property under contract earlier this year. And really since that point, I've made good progress toward understanding and completing the site due diligence and really understanding the different, the path involved in getting it entitled for a 324-unit resort-style multifamily development. Pacerne is a true vertical end user. We have full intentions of trying to expedite that approval process. We're hoping to get the project fully approved and permitted so we can close on the site late summer, early fall next year, and we have full intentions of breaking ground immediately thereafter. Next slide, please. So I put this brief presentation together here today. I just wanted to touch on a couple things. I want to talk a little bit about Pacerne Real Estate Group, talk about what the community will look like, outline and explain the demand I think that it currently exists for apartments in this area, and also outline what I think the project will do for Manatee County. Next slide, please. With respect to Pacerne, Pacerne is family-owned and operated. It's been in business since 1925. It was founded in Rhode Island. We have offices in Orlando, which is the office I work out of. We've been there since 1984. We're vertically integrated with in-house development, which is the side of the business that I'm on. In addition to that, we have in-house construction, so we have an in-house general contractor, and also an in-house property management company that handles our leasing and on-site management of all of the projects we own and operate throughout the country. Since inception, Pacerne has developed 40,000 units. Today, our portfolio includes 30,000 units in 23 states. So as you can see, we tend to own our properties for the long term. And just as a comment, We just completed a project in Hillsborough County in Brandon called the Oasis at Brandon. It's 310 units, and this project in Manatee County is going to be modeled very similar to that one. Next slide. A little bit about Pacerne Management Company. Management staff includes over 700 employees. That's both folks in all of our corporate offices and for on-site staff. Pacerne Management is ranked as one of the top property management companies in the country by National Real Estate Investor Magazine. With respect to this property, we'll have an on-site staff of 8 employees. They'll be there daily from 9 o'clock to 6 p.m., 7 days a week. We'll also have a courtesy officer that will offer some discounted rent to. They'll be on the property after hours, patrolling, just making sure that the residents are safe in the after hours. Wanted to comment here, we have pretty strict income guidelines, and we do background checks. We often joke in our office. I think it's more difficult to qualify to live at one of our communities than it is to get a mortgage. I think the mortgage folks just focus more so on income and on credit. We do extensive tests on that, but also on background. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, so I have here just a couple of exhibits that just show what the site plan will look like. We've got basically 12 residential buildings. Most of them are centered around this centralized stormwater retention pond. We've more or less created an amenity out of that. It's there for stormwater purposes, but at night, or it'll have fountains that will be lit at night, and we also have a 6-foot sidewalk trail, jogging and walking trail that's around that pond. To the north, we're going to leave the existing natural landscape buffer. There's a big utility easement there, and a nice residential neighborhood to the north. So we're going to be leaving that existing landscape buffer there. To the west, you can see we've got a dry stormwater retention pond there. We're leaving that for flooding in the event of a 100-year flood, and also to provide a nice buffer from the residential user to the west. The main entrance road, which comes up from University Parkway, that is not built. That will be Kentucky Street. We're going to complete that. We're going to build that to county standards and dedicate it to the county. You have the rotary there in the middle of the site. So if you extend, if you continue to extend north, you'll come into our community. If you go to the east, we're going to be building another road there called Broadway. Broadway will also be built to county standards and dedicated to the county. Our hope is that as the property owners to the east, there's 3 or 4 of them, we're hoping that as they develop those parcels, most of them are vacant, we're hoping that they will continue Broadway, extend it all the way to Shade. And as you know, Shade currently connects to Broadway, and that goes all the way out to Tuttle. So we're hoping that this project puts the connectivity in place, so when that final leg of Broadway is completed, it will essentially provide connectivity from Kentucky all the way to Tuttle. Next slide. This is just an illustration of the pool area. Beach entry pool. All retaining walls, so it sits on the pond nicely, provides nice views for the residents. We also have a cabana there with a summer kitchen, some nice seating areas, and some TVs. So trying to provide nice amenities and really make it a resort-style community for our residents. Next slide. This here, we're actually completing this. This is a project in Orlando called the Oasis at Moss Park. It's 320 units. I just wanted to show here, if you look at the configuration, it's very similar to what we're proposing here in Manatee County. This sort of setup works very well, where we have the buildings around the retention pond with the fountain and also the boulevard entrance. So there's just some consistency to what we're proposing and what we've done in the past, and we know works well. Next slide. It's just a rendering of coming north from the Rotary, driving into the community, looking at the clubhouse. Next slide. This here, this is a footprint of the clubhouse. Probably difficult to see on the slide, but basically it's 10,000 square feet. You know, probably the biggest apartment clubhouse in the market. We've got adequate space here for a club room and a kitchen. We provide an area for a coffee bar. We have an outdoor space that overlooks the pool area. That's all screened in and enclosed. On the eastern side of the clubhouse, toward the right, that's open after hours. We'll have a state-of-the-art fitness center there, a room for yoga, a game room. We'll also have a business center, a conference room, and men's and women's restrooms. Next slide. The finishes on the interior are really as nice as you can get, you know, these days in the marketplace. Stainless steel appliances, granite countertops, some track lighting, pendant lighting. You see the arches for the architectural detail. Those are laminate wood floors. Also, what you don't see here are walk-in closets and a laundry room with a full-size washer and dryer. So for an average rental rate of about $1,050 to, I'm sorry, an average rental rate of $1,250 to $1,275 a month, we're providing a great value and also at a price that we feel is appropriate for the workforce in the area. Next slide. Next slide. So yeah, these next couple slides just discuss, or they just show the demand that I believe exists in the marketplace. This is basically occupancy rates for projects in Sarasota and Manatee County. It's basically sorted by apartment age. So we have apartments built before 1970, then projects in the 70s, in the 80s, in the 90s, between 2000 and 2009, and after 2000. On average, the average occupancy rate for both counties for apartments is 96.9%. That's extremely high. And what's interesting about that is for projects that were completed after 2000, the occupancy rate is even higher at 97.4%. So obviously there's tremendous demand, and the apartment communities in the area are basically at full occupancy. Next slide. This is interesting. This basically breaks down the inventory of the apartments by age. So you can see that you know, the majority of the apartment stock in Sarasota and Manatee County was completed between 1980 and 1989. But the product that was built after 2000 is only represents 2% of the existing inventory. What has happened is during the condo conversion days of 2003 to maybe 2006 or 7, a lot of the Class A newer product along the University Corridor in both Sarasota and Manatee were converted to condos. And so what you have here, when you look at this, is that what it shows is that there is a lack of new product in the marketplace. And so we believe that this project is just an attempt to replenish the Class A apartment stock that was there before all the converters bought everything and converted it to condominiums. Next slide. Here, just wanted to outline what we thought were the benefits for Manatee County. Obviously, putting in some new road infrastructure with Kentucky and Broadway. Also, we need to put in a sewer line that starts on University Parkway. It's going to be put in the public right-of-way east all the way to Tuttle, and then north all the way to Shade. So that sewer line will be in the public right-of-way, needs to be put in for our project, but obviously as other folks develop to the east of us, they can tap into that. We think that the project is a catalyst for future retail and restaurant development. We think it's also good for the existing retail in the area. We think the project, we know the project will provide new construction jobs. In terms of impact fees, it's projected at closing $2.5 million to the county. And then on an ongoing basis, the projected annual property tax bill will be in excess of $650,000 annually. Next slide. Yeah, and that concludes my remarks. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with you. I'd like to turn it over to Valerie Hubbard, one of my consultant planners, for a couple of final comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Valerie Hubbard. My address is 106 East College Avenue, Suite 1200, Tallahassee, Florida, 32301. As Mr. Novacki said, I'm a planner. I'm not an attorney, even though I do work for a law firm. I work for the firm of Akerman LLC, which does provide legal services for the project. What I wanted to go over is my background is primarily, I sort of have specialized a lot in the issue of, and I need that slide back up, the issue of comprehensive planning and comprehensive plan consistency and implementation. So what I wanted to say is that I have reviewed this item, and our application demonstrates consistency with the comprehensive plan and land development code. Now I understand we're not talking about the PD and PSP today, although I would hope that if we can get some things resolved, we could re-advertise and maybe bring it forward before April. But at the present time, to concentrate on the comprehensive plan, we are asking for this residential 16 of future land use map designation. And the reason for that is that the project is intended to be just about 12.7 dwelling units per acre, but because the limit under the lower designation, what's 9 under the current designation, it's 12 under one of your other available designations. 16 is the minimum we can use to get to the density that we need in order to develop this project with all the amenities and so forth. So if I could just take a couple of minutes to finish up. So we believe that this area is ready for transition. There's a lot of piecemeal development going on there. This is an area that sits back off the road primarily. It's really not very good for the commercial use that's intended there for under the current designation. So we think this is the perfect type of use for this particular project. It's consistent with all of the comprehensive plan policies, the density, intensity, locational criteria. If you can switch to the next slide, take me about 1 minute. So again, appropriate density within a designated growth area. This is, in the right part of the county. It's consistent with your visioning exercises. How shall we grow? The One Bay Growth visioning exercise. One of the main things that those exercises talked about was providing alternative housing options. And that is what this does. As Mr. Vecchi pointed out, you don't have very many, really any new leased residential product in this area. So this will give that additional housing option near all the employment that is existing and continues to occur in this area. The proximity to jobs and so forth, to the interconnection that's going to occur with, through Broadway, and if that continues to go through. So we believe that with all of the criteria in the plan, this provides better use of land, better use of facilities and services, and is completely compatible with surrounding uses. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant at this point? Okay. Ms. Tusing, if you could please do your presentation.
Yes, sir. Good morning again. Margaret Tusing with Building and Development Services. What I'm going to focus on is what was the original history of this property was that in 1989 it was designated for light industrial uses. Then there was a comprehensive plan amendment in 1995 to change it to the mixed-use designation that it currently has. The existing mixed-use designation allows for 9 dwelling units to the acre gross, a maximum of 20 net, up to a 1.0 floor area ratio, and a maximum of 300,000 square feet of commercial development. The proposed comprehensive plan amendment, or comprehensive plan category of residential 16, has a maximum 16 gross dwelling units to the acre, 20 dwelling units net, 0.25 FAR, and a maximum of 150,000 square feet. When we look at the comprehensive plan amendment process, we assume worst-case scenarios. So what we look at is as though the project is going to develop at the maximum density, which is 16 dwelling units to the acre. So in the staff report, when you see all of the analyses done regarding water and sewer projections, wastewater projection, traffic, and school questions, it's all based on the maximum potential, which is 409 dwelling units. And that's how we have analyzed it for the comprehensive plan. As Sarah had stated, this is a legislative process, and part of the legislative policy decision is to determine whether the proposed map amendment for the Oasis at University is in the best interest of the public, considering the following. Is the proposed map amendment compatible with development trends? And is it compatible with the uses and densities in the surrounding area? And what I have done is, if you're familiar with where the area is, that coming up? This is University Parkway. Over here is Lockwood Ridge. This is the property right here. This is a single-family development that is currently ongoing, Soleil West. This is Soleil condominiums, which are attached units. And then you have multiple residential units, both multifamily and single-family attached, as well as some additional single-family development up in here. This is the Walmart at Lockwood Ridge and University, to kind of give you an orientation. So a large part of what you see here is part of the University Commons and the University Commons DRI, and then also the University Grove area. So when you look at the development in the area, it's pretty well developed and fairly intense, not intense, but it does have density patterns that are consistent with what is being requested. For compatibility purposes, we looked at the map amendment and we found it to be consistent with the following policies. Policies 2.1.1.2, which is to designate land within existing developed areas at densities compatible with that existing development. The densities in this area range from 2.73 dwelling units to the acre, which is within the Soleil West development, up to 18.75, which is one of the projects, multifamily projects, that is currently under construction here in University Commons. So the average densities for multifamily in the area is around 15 dwelling units to the acre, and the combined between the single-family attached and the multifamily is around 9.75 when you look at the densities of what is existing. Policy 2.1.2.3 also allows for consideration of new residential development with characteristics compatible with existing development. Again, within the area, you already have a mixture of multifamily developments at densities similar to what is being proposed with the residential 16, as well as single-family attached, commercial, industrial. There's a mixed use of products within this area. Policy 2.1.2.4 is to limit urban sprawl through consideration of new development when deemed compatible with existing and future development and areas that are internal to or contiguous expansions of the built environment. It's my recommendation and professional opinion that this project is internal to existing developments. It's an infill project about 25.5 acres, and it meets what is consistent within the area. Policy 2.1.2.7 is that we review projects as they come in for existing development patterns, which I've already gone over, the types of land uses. There's residential throughout this area, as well as industrial and commercial type uses. The transition between the land uses, there are existing natural barriers for the project to the north, which is single-family detached, and then there's a railroad immediately to the west of the site, and then industrial uses on the west side of the railroad. And there's also kind of a natural vegetation and drainage ditches that exist along there. The density intensity of the proposed land uses as well as the existing. And as I had stated, that the densities are very similar to what is being requested by this development. And then also to look at the availability of adequate roadways, University Parkway, this project as proposed, and what we looked at during the review process is that there would be actually a decrease in the amount of traffic that would be generated by this project versus what was originally approved with the mixed use and planned development commercial development. And also the availability of adequate water and sewer facilities and parks. In the analysis, we looked at that. The water and sewer services are in the area. The developer will need to connect and make whatever improvements he needs to downstream, whether it be lift stations, and they will do that in water. And there's approximately 6 county parks within a 5-mile radius of this project. So it's our recommendation and opinion that the range of the residential densities within the area from 2.7 dwelling units to the acre for the single-family detached to the 18.75 for the multifamily, and the average densities are consistent with the requested residential 16. And also, the range of potential uses in the residential 16 are for suburban or urban residential, which this is an urban-type residential use, and then neighborhood retail. Again, we also look at trying to limit urban sprawl and trying to propose developments that are located where water and sewer and service exist. And it is our opinion that there is available facilities by connection, and that this project also limits the proposed amendment may have the impact of reducing urban sprawl by discouraging leapfrog development by concentrating urban development at locations adjacent to existing urban development. As shown on the previous aerial, it does that because it's a fairly developed area. And maximizing the use of existing infrastructure. Manatee County has invested in the existing infrastructure in the area, the water, the sewer, the parks, and the roadways. And our preliminary studies indicate that a potential decrease would be realized in traffic generation, while there would be a potential increase in the water, sewer, and solid waste services, as well as students. So we believe that this project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, and staff does recommend adoption of the proposed plan amendment from mixed use to the residential 16. And if you have any questions, I'm available.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Quick question.
Mr. Horgan?
I know for the purposes of today, we're not supposed to be looking at that site plan.
Correct.
Correct. But I notice it's a very long internal road. When you move forward, will that be something that's addressed with the fire department?
Yes, they will look at that, but
Access?
access has been looked at, and they are proposing 2 means of access. It's not just one. There's one from Kentucky, which is their main entrance, and then also one off of Florida Street.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Tusing.
Thank you.
We're going to go to the public comment portion of the hearing. Ms. Miranda, you signed up for item number 5. Item number 5 is being pulled. This is the comprehensive plan amendment for the same property. Do you wish to speak on this? Okay. Yes, ma'am. If you would, please step up to the microphone.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just a clarification on number 5, the zoning ordinance. When you get to that point, you'll be opening the public hearing, continue to date certain. Anyone who's here can speak to it if.
Right.
If they want.
So you'll have the opportunity to speak on the same subject twice if you wish.
My name is Sandra Miranda. I'm a new resident in the Soleil West subdivision at 3042 Oriole Drive. So I'm on the south end of the Soleil subdivision and what will be the north end of this new project. And I have your typical resident concerns. My home was in the $300,000 range, and there are 113 homes in Soleil West. There are actually going to be 46 buildings with 4 units each in, I don't know if they call it Soleil East, but the condos portion of that development. So I have concerns about the height of these units. Of course, I would be happier if the density were lower and it was 2 stories instead of 3. But, you know, these are things that I don't think I have any probably say in, because developers have to make money and the property has to be worth what they spend on it, et cetera, et cetera. So I just have some, I guess, practical concerns. One is about safety and separation. I was reading some of the documents, and I noticed that they're exceeding the distance that they have to. I forgot what you call it. The spacing in between us and them, basically. So the buffer of 50, they're doing 50 feet to the parking, and they're doing 128 feet to the building. And that's pretty good. Now, Manatee County, I know it does a pretty good job of picking up the garbage. They're early and they're pretty quick, but it would be very nice if the dumpsters for this development were placed at a good distance from our property, so that to minimize that noise and any other noise concerns that can be minimized. I think for safety and comfort of you know, the nice distance between neighbors, it would be great if there was some fencing. I mean, I have concerns about this in my own subdivision. We have that railroad line there, we have that canal there, and it would be better if there was some separation between these properties that allowed for a little bit of a feeling of safety, that people aren't running around in the railroad tracks or falling into ditches. I mean, that's just practical. And then having lived there for a little while, I also have concerns about lighting. It is pitch black in these areas. Broadway and Shade, I mean, you turn into Shade off University and you already have to put on your brights. I don't know what it's going to be like for the entrance to this area, but if those improvements are being made to Kentucky and Florida and Broadway, then there should be some concern about improving lighting. That's it.
Thank you very much, and I would suggest that you speak with the project representative. Many of these issues will be resolved in the next process, and you'll have an opportunity to have an audience.
Okay.
That's one of the benefits of coming to a public hearing. You get to see who the applicants are. So, thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this matter? Anyone? Okay, seeing nobody else come forward, we're going to close the public portion, public comment portion of the hearing, and we're going to go to the staff closing comments. Is anything to add?
No, sir. The questions from the public were more related to site plan related issues, so I do not have anything to add.
Thank you very much. Questions for staff? Seeing none. Applicant, there wasn't really anything to rebut, but do you have any closing comments? Okay, thank you very much. Any discussion?
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, Mr. Rhodes.
Make a motion based on the evidence presented, the comments made at the public hearing, the technical support documents, and the finding the request to be consistent with the Community Planning Act as codified in application portions of Chapter 163, Part 2, Florida statutes, and the Manatee County Comprehensive Plan. I move to recommend transmittal of Plan Amendment PA 15-02 as recommended by staff.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Delesline, second. Is there any deliberation or, okay, seeing nobody wanting to speak, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Chair votes aye. Those opposed, like sign. Seeing none, it passes unanimous. Thank you. All right, we've got one more item to open the public. Is this, Ms. Shank, is this actually considered a public hearing?
Well, yes, Mr. Chairman, you open the public hearing, and see if anyone would like to speak, and then staff has a proposed motion to read.
Okay, all right. So we're going to open the public hearing on item number 5. Ms. Knapp, if you could, please read the item into the record.
PDR 1513, Paren Z, Paren P, Panasora Corp., Tennessee Street Property LLC, The Oasis at University. This item is to be continued to April 14th, 2016 Plan Commission meeting.
Thank you. So you say open it for public comment?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anybody in the public who wishes to speak on this item? If you would, please step forward. And again, this is quasi-judicial, so please state your name and that you have been sworn.
Just a question about the...
I guess about the process.
Yes, it's the process. I just wanted to clarify, because we didn't know about the continuance until today. If we can get things ready to move forward before that continuance date, and we pay for the advertising to advertise separately, can we move forward before that point?
Well, staff will have to address that. There's also 2 street vacations are being processed, and
Right.
we didn't feel it'd be ready sooner.
So I don't think we'll be able to decide that here, so if you would, please follow up with staff, and thank you, though. Is there anybody who wishes to speak on this matter? If you wish to do so, please step forward. Seeing no one step forward, we're going to close the public comment portion of the hearing, and staff has a motion or a suggested motion. Is that what it is? Mr. DeLesline?
I move.
Wait, let's see what staff has to say.
Yeah, the motion would be, I motion to continue the public hearing for PDR 15-13, Paren Z, Paren P, to the April 14th, 2016 Plan Commission meeting.
Just one follow-up question, or actually 2, that's the same motion that's in the, in the packet, okay. And if by chance staff works everything out with the applicant, does that mean that date's binding, or should the?
This means we don't have to re-advertise.
Okay. So does the motion need to be amended?
I don't think the Plan Commission gets into whether it can be heard sooner or not. We just want to set dates so we keep it on schedule.
Okay.
Staff can work with the applicant if they have anything
Okay,
ready
all right.
sooner.
Understood, thank you. Mr. DeLesline?
Mr. Chair, I move to continue the public hearing for PDR 15-13 ZP to the April 14, 2015 Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you. Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Bauer, second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Those opposed, like sign. None. Item passes. I'm sorry, Ms. Knapp,
The motion that I read said 2016, however, Mr. DeLesline said 2015. Can you repeat the motion, please?
Sorry about that.
let me open it up again.
Mr. Chairman, I move to continue the public hearing for PDR 1513 ZP to the April 14, 2016 Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you very much. Mr. DeLesline's motion, Mr. Bauer second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Chair votes aye, passes unanimously. Now we get to bang the gavel. Okay, very good. All right, we have one more item.
Doesn't make sense.
Business. That is election of officers.
Yes.
And
I'm Tana Acevedo with the clerk's office, and I open the floor for nominations for chairman for 2016.
I'd like to nominate Bill Connerly, who's our new chairman, and I think he's done a great job during the past year, and I'd like to renominate him for chairman.
Thank you.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. I guess that's what we do. Do we have to?
Can we talk about you now? Or?
No. Is there anybody else push enough to?
It's trying.
No, in your hands.
Are there any other nominations? Anybody, please, anybody.
Public comment.
All right, we're going to close nominations.
Yes.
Thank you.
And you have the floor to
Okay.
do the other nominations. First vice, second vice, and third vice.
Okay, first vice. Chair will open the floor for nominations on first vice chair.
I would like to nominate Tim Rhodes.
Thank you. Nomination for Mr. Rhodes. Is there a second?
I second.
Second, okay. Are there any other nominations for first vice chair? Seeing none, we're going to close the nominations. We don't need to vote if there's only one nomination. Okay, second vice chair, we're going to open the floor for motions on second vice chair.
Mr., go ahead.
Let's throw Al in the hat.
Throw Al into the ring. There's a nomination for Mr. Horgan as first, second vice chair, I'm sorry. Is there a?
Second.
Second, Mr. Rutledge. Is there any other nominations for second vice chair? So, seeing none, we're going to close the nominations for second vice chair. Is there a third vice chair? Do we keep going until we run out of people?
I'd like to make a nomination for Mr. Bauer.
Okay, we've opened the nominations for third vice chair. Mr. Bauer has been nominated. Is there a second? I'll second it. There's one nomination. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, we'll close the nominations for, what do we have to, third vice chair?
And that's it.
That's it.
Anybody, no secretary, no,
Treasurer.
no sergeant of arms, anything? Yeah, treasurer. So, does that conclude our business today, Ms. Acevedo? Okay, thank you very much. We're gonna close the meeting. Thank you.
Ladies, good to be with you today.
I'm glad I made it back.
I thought you had lost your seat when I saw your
No,
cover show
that
up
was
here.
only the impact fee
okay.
thing.
I felt
Good display. I thought it was all women.
I agree with